We are live, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains episode number 689 for April 1st. We're not fooling. This is the pre-show, the magical time of the show where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we occasionally say outrageous things, and we work on technical problems. We had one last week, and we have one this week. So we have a special guest, one of our listeners. Parker, say hello to the world.
Hey, WeatherBrains.
See, I think what we ought to do is bring on one of our listener creepers every week on the pre-show for a minute. Parker, you're a creeper of the week. How about that?
Okay, I'll be a creeper.
So you tell everybody where you live. You're down in the Florida Panhandle,
Pace,
right?
Florida, just outside of Pensacola.
Pace, Florida, near Pensacola. Awesome. Well, so Parker, the question is, how long have you been listening to this show?
Well, you started it whenever I was, 11, I think.
Oh, boy.
I was born in 94, so.
It's about right. And so you've been listening the whole time? That's disturbing.
I really started.
Disturbing.
Yeah, I'm weird. I fall asleep listening to the show every night.
So do we. That's what we do here. So
here's an interesting question. You were listening at 11. Did it stunt your growth?
Yeah. Yes, I eat a lot and I can't gain a pound. That's the show title.
Yeah.
Did you see my note about Jordan, James? You need to invite him.
Yeah, let me get on that. Parker, we got to go, buddy. I'll let you go. Thanks for coming on the show, okay? We'll see you next time.
Thank y'all.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, he's not staying? He's just there for the pre-show?
Yeah, Parker's listened to this show for a long, long time, and I promised I'd get him on the pre-show one day. And that's people's goal, is to be on the pre-show of WeatherBrains. So he can put that on his resume now.
He even titled it already.
Yeah. I'm having some more weird audio issues. Can you hear this? No, you cannot hear that. Dad,
what is it? No.
No. So you can't hear the elements coming from the soundboard.
Mm-mm.
Let me try this.
Let's get some.
Yes.
You hear that?
Yes.
Okay. And the bell and the buzzer.
Yes.
Okay. I can't control the audio coming back to me the normal way, but that's okay. Well, that's no big deal. All right.
By the way, you were out of sync with the rest of the show last week.
Was it on the audio side or the video side?
The audio side.
Okay. Well, that's an easy fix. Let me pull up your email. And,
Kim.
Hello. How you doing?
Good. How many days were you in Alabama?
3.5. It was pretty quick.
All right.
Probably not even. It was probably like 3, actually, solid. I'm sad I didn't get the chance to step by and see you, James.
No, I know how busy those whirlwind trips are. I totally understand. Did you fly into Atlanta or Birmingham?
Flew into Birmingham Sunday evening, and then had Monday morning with some folks in the forecast office. Went down south, did a trip through several counties around surrounding Lee County and including Lee County, and then went to Georgia a little bit, and then made my way up to Atlanta.
How many hours from Birmingham to Lee County?
It's not that far, actually. It's really not bad. 1.5 maybe direct. So I went by way of, I went to Montgomery first and then went over. So it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, there's multiple ways you can go down Interstate 65 to Montgomery and then 85 to Auburn, or you can go down US 280 and they're kind of almost the same. All right, so I've invited your guest, Kevin.
There he is. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Wow, look at that, a tie. It's the first time everyone's worn a tie on this show that wasn't about
to say. What do you think this is, professional or something, or what? I mean,
I told you this was casual. You look very nice.
Oh, thank you.
Jordan's looking for a gig. That's why he wants to impress.
Okay.
Kim, are you hiring?
Okay.
Hang on just a second. Oh no. I'm trying to find the address for Danielle to invite her.
Is Danielle coming?
Yeah, tonight's HasSimp night.
Didn't know. It's what night? Oh, HasSimp, yeah.
Where am I? What's going on?
I think he's testing a soundboard. That wasn't an editorial comment on hazard.
No. I'm testing the sound. I got some really weird audio routing problems. And I'm also hearing a mic rattle, which just went away. All right, I will invite her.
Did you get that USB mic working, Jordan?
Yes, I did. You should be able to. It should be coming through right now.
Tap on it. Tap on it and let's see if that's the right one.
Coming through?
No, I think you're on the. Go to the settings and make sure you tell it you want
Make
that.
sure it's on the. Okay, yeah. Let me change it. Okay, is that a little bit better?
Tap it again. Yeah.
Okay.
Tap the inline mic for your headsets too. I feel like there's an echo or something.
Okay.
The one on No, the one on your headset on your earbuds.
Okay.
Your earbuds, the one that hangs down from your earbuds.
The wire.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
No,
should be off, I think.
Okay. Yep, you're good.
Okay.
Danielle, can you hear us okay?
I can, yes.
Ooh,
sorry if you guys are. Oh crap! Hold on.
That's show title.
I'm sorry. I am totally.
That's the show title right there. Hold on.
I'm on my husband's Mac and I don't know what I'm doing. Oh gosh! I think I got rid of.
It's another show title. I'm on my husband's Mac and I don't know what I'm doing.
I might have to get him down here. Hold on one second.
Wow, raking them in tonight.
Right? Yeah, just one after another.
Oh, yeah.
I lost the screen.
Well, while she's doing that, I want to highlight for you all that I'm doing advertising for the AMS Centennial with my Centennial cup this evening. Is it backwards for you all?
Nope.
No.
Okay.
No, perfect.
What is it? Oh, AMS.
Fabulous.
Wow, look at there.
Can you guys see me?
Yep.
We can.
Okay, good.
No, you
gotcha.
sound great and you look great. You don't need to do anything.
Awesome.
You're good.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Thanks. Yay.
Look at the professional setup we have here, Daniel. Wow.
You're just proving, Danielle, that what we always say: the smarter the person, the harder it is for them to get on this show.
Honestly, this is not my forte. This is not my stuff either. We do a podcast together, so that's part of the reason we have all this stuff. But
what's it about?
Budgeting as a couple. So
really,
yeah, it's an ingenious name. It's just called Budget Couple.
Wow,
So look us up.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But I'm not used to all of it, so
you can use that as your pick of the week then.
Nice.
I'm about to say we'll promote your show within this show. We'll send you a whole bunch of creepers over there.
If I just hand you my money, can you budget it?
Yeah.
We're very down to earth people. We're not nothing fancy, just us arguing about money on air.
Wow.
Super fun. Yeah.
One day we hope to have a professional podcast, but we're not quite there yet.
Oh, you guys are awesome. I love it.
No. So I am sitting here trying to be sure that I think I'm good. Boy, something is just hosed up with my audio configuration. We'll figure it out later. All right. I've had all kind of my network attached storage died. I got a NAS problem. I've got audio problems. I just got problems. I one of these RAID arrays with like 5 hard drives in there, and it's got redundancy. So if a hard drive fails, you pop it out and stick a new one in there. It really works well. I've had these things for years and years. I've never had a problem until this weekend. And thankfully, I think that the NAS is okay. It's the connectivity with the network, so they're going to swap it out and send a new one. But we'll get this stuff ironed out.
Did you try turning it off and on again?
No, I need to.
Try turning it off and on again, off and on again, off and on again.
So,
Danielle's like, oh, geez.
What have I signed up for?
you,
Looking for that button that says, "Oh, I'm having trouble again. Sorry."
yeah.
This late at night too. This is
Our
past my
advice is
bedtime.
to run as fast as you can. And Daniel, where are you?
I'm in Maryland. I just have
Oh,
a
so you're in
really
Eastern
early
time.
bedtime because I have a toddler. So I'm tired.
Wow. So Kim, moms can go without sleep. You know that.
That we can. We just don't like it.
Yeah, we're not necessarily sane on the end of that, but we can do it. We can do it. Yeah, it's pretty fun. After a couple weeks of our daughter being a really solid sleeper, last night she decided she was going to be offline. So mom had a Monday today.
That happens.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
It does.
Even my coffee machine was broken. I was like, okay, so if I can go without sleep, at least let me have coffee. And I went to make the coffee, and it was definitely like, I don't even know how to describe what it did. I've never seen some creation like that come out of a coffee machine, but it was terrible. So
let's play. Guess what's in Kim's AMS cup?
I went with water tonight. I feel like it's a bad choice.
Water's a bad choice.
if you wouldn't have gone with water, what would the other option have been?
Definitely bourbon.
Bourbon girl.
Definitely bourbon. Yeah. Just a shot on the side here.
Spoken like a
So
true
are
mom.
we missing anybody, or are we all here? I think we're all here, aren't we, Kim?
I think so. I don't think there's no one else from Has Simp. This is going to be the Danielle show on that front, and then I don't think Bill was making it tonight. So I think this
Bill
should be.
and Troy is out too.
Yeah.
You get
Troy said he'll be in here late. He'll be here,
Okay.
but he'll be late. So
Okay.
John, let's check your audio real quick just to be sure.
Oh yeah,
Oh.
Chipmunk Town is back.
Yep. This is why I've learned.
It's
Yeah.
the commercial. What is it? Is it the State Farm commercial?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the
that's
helium one.
awesome.
That's
Nobody panic.
yeah.
We'll have this
All right.
wrapped up in a few minutes. Thunder.
And good evening to our television viewers watching on the television side. You are joining at a very opportune moment. This is WeatherBrains, the pre-show. We're about to start this show 30 minutes after the hour. Thank you for watching on television. And we're going to get this going here. John, try it again, buddy.
James, how's this?
Good. You're good. That is so stinking weird. All right, let's get this thing going here because we have mamas that need some sleep. So we're going to record channel 1 and channel 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, this is WeatherBrains episode number 689, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for April 1st. 2019. How did this work out? April Fools. Kevin, give us an April Fool's prank. What'd you? You know what? We got some stern message. No April Fool's jokes on the air. There's a legal issue. Oh yeah, when he's stern warnings. You can't do anything on the air. So,
wow.
Did you do anything funny on the air today?
No, just showed up. That's funny enough.
And that's a show title.
So I'm anxious for our guests. I'm anxious to hear how Kim did in Alabama because I know she went to check on things. But as I was thinking about her this morning and being in Alabama, I thought I figured out our notifications problem. Here's what we need to do. Every big approaching storm day, 2 or 3 days out, we send Jim Cantori, Tim Marshall, and Kim Cloco McLean to the target town, and it'll empty in a day and a half.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
There'll be a mass evacuation if that's the case.
People will
we
know
have a lot of
that's
questions
coming.
We're going to talk about Has Simp and social science. I've got so many questions, but Aubrey Urbanowitz,
Wait, can I introduce our guest, Weatherbrain, before you go on to?
Oh yeah, yes, go.
Well, here's the thing. I've been spending some time, a couple days, last couple of weeks up at the University of Oklahoma for various reasons. I get to see Kim and Rick, and I've been working on stories. But they have a new flock of graduating meteorology seniors, some on a broadcast track, and I thought, wow, it'd be fun to bring some of them on the program because, as James has been saying for the last year or two, we need to get some young blood in here to fix all of these things that we have so badly fouled up over the last couple of years. So I want to introduce Jordan Overton, who is an OU senior. And Jordan, Jordan, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be on.
We're happy to have you, and we'll give you a chance to plug yourself and what you're doing, looking for gigs and things like that in a little while. But we're thrilled to have you. So jump in, don't be a wallflower, and we're thrilled you're here.
Alrighty.
All right, Aubrey Urbanowicz, Chief Meteorologist, WHSV Channel 3 in Harrisonburg. Aubrey, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you guys?
We're good. It's Monday. I'm fairly energized. Things kind of quiet tonight, so that's good. So how's the TV biz? How's all these extra duties working for you?
We're trucking along, trying to find a couple more hours in the day, which I have yet to find. If I do find a couple, I'll let you know where they are. But we're coming along. So just trying to balance everything out. And we're trying to trim down things and maybe see things we might not have to do anymore, and things
because you've lost a person, is that right, in your office?
Yeah. So we're down from a 4-person team to a 3-person team. So we're just trying to shuffle around some things. We stopped doing some things and just kind of retiming out our day and things like that, so we can better time management.
Jordan might come work for free for a few months. Are you interested in that, Jordan?
I'll take free.
Yeah.
He's not too thrilled.
He's very excited about that.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of severe weather, so you might be out of your element.
All right. Dr. John, what's happening up in Pennsylvania this evening?
Well, James, the wind has finally cooled down a little bit, 35 to 40 miles per hour the last 24 hours.
Wow.
And I'm glad to see that upper trough move out of here. It's enough. Let's start to warm up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had temperatures down here as low as 26 this morning, and for this low latitude, that's pretty cold for the.
Yeah, you guys had a freeze warning. That's right.
Yeah, sure did for the 1st of April. That's pretty brisk. But Kim Cloco McLean, that's a tongue twister. Kim Cloco McLean. Kim Cloco McLean. Say that 20 times and we'll get it right. Kim Cloco McLean.
You'll either get it right or very wrong.
That's true.
So it's Troy just joined us here. Troy, where have you been? You've been fishing tonight or what? Yo, Troy.
He's logging in. There he is.
Hello.
You've been fishing? What you been doing?
Science fairing tonight, Round Rock, Texas High School.
Nice.
Just pulling in. So,
okay. Actually, I did a high school crowd today too. Typically, I'm better with 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, but I spoke to some high school kids today. And they were just great. But Kim, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you. This is kind of your night, so let's bring in our special guest.
All right, wonderful. Thanks, guys. So tonight we have sort of another part in a series we're running on the National Weather Service's Hazard Simplification Program, or something we affectionately call HazSimp. It's something that has been going for just a couple of years, a project, and I'll have Danielle describe this a little bit more. But for those who aren't familiar, just in general, it's a program that's designed to potentially redesign or at least reinvigorate the National Weather Service's watch, warning, and advisory system. So tonight we have Danielle Nagel on. She's a social science researcher, and what's your technical name now with the program? Are you the program manager for the HazSimp program?
Project manager.
Project manager for the HazSimp program. And she works with Eli Jacks from Weather Service headquarters on that. So welcome to the show, Danielle.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So you have a really interesting background. I think that the audience would really enjoy getting to know you and some of the path you've followed. We do have people who listen to the show who are students or young professionals or professionals in all kinds of parts of their career path who are interested in maybe branching into the social sciences. And I think you have a really nice story to talk about coming into that, sort of down the path. So tell us a little bit about what got you into meteorology, and then how you made the pivot into the social sciences.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I tripped over social science along the way, and it was kind of random. But meteorology, I like the rest of those in my generation. I think I just started watching Twister way too many times. But seriously, that probably did influence me to some extent. And also my dad minored in meteorology. So he and I would chat growing up, and I would look at some of his textbooks, and I just had a serious obsession with weather from an early age. So I decided to get a degree in meteorology right out of high school. I was sure about what I wanted, or at least I thought I was. And I did really love my meteorology classes, and a huge shout out to Millersville University actually for really being an amazing meteorology program. But I did sort of just trip onto social science. I actually came across a pamphlet or a flyer or something for our Center of Disaster Research and Education at the university, and something about it just drew me to it, I guess. And I started working there as a research assistant, and after 6 months or so, I fell in love with it. I worked a lot on Hurricane Katrina material, given the time frame and when it was at. And I guess there was some point along the way where I realized that I wouldn't be satisfied with just meteorology alone. That I really loved that mixture of social and physical sciences, that intersection there. And it led me to where I am now. I ended up getting my doctorate actually in disaster science at University of Delaware, and I worked on warning response to tornado warnings and flash flood warnings. And I also had a really cool opportunity to interview a lot of forecasters and emergency managers and broadcast media through my dissertation as well. So I hit the ground running and loved every minute of it.
Yeah. So a couple of things about your background I think people will find fun. For your master's degree, in between those things,
Oh, yeah,
you're at Texas Tech, which is exciting right now. Congratulations for basketball. But you also had the opportunity to do field work. You got to be part of the Vortex 2 field campaign, right?
Yeah, I glazed over that, didn't I? Yeah, so funny. I was actually, this is hopefully none of my Texas Tech professors are listening. So I was waiting on the program at University of Delaware. It was actually not finished being created when I graduated from Millersville. And I was like, well, I have to find something to do for 2 years. And so I went to Texas Tech, and I would never, ever regret it for a second. It was a great experience. I got to chase tornadoes just like in Twister. And it was a little bit of a lifelong dream. And so I was a part of Vortex for 2 years. And we did some freelance chasing here and there in Texas as well. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, we can come back around to that if the conversation cycles back to that, because I think you have some really fun experiences you can share from all those field campaigns and storm chasing experiences. So the program at the University of Delaware, you worked with a center called the Disaster Research Center, and I want to highlight for our audience that this exists as a thing. This is something that is an interdisciplinary research center. There are a couple around the country, right, where natural hazards sort of response work is really been born, and it's some of the stuff that we draw on in our field in the social sciences. Can you tell us a little bit about the DRC?
Yeah, the DRC has been around for a long time, actually. I think it's coming up on 60 years or maybe more at this point. It actually started in Ohio and moved over to Delaware not long after that. But it's one of the oldest centers that focuses on disaster science and research. The other probably being the Natural Hazard Center out in Colorado that a lot of you may be familiar with. But it's done a lot of great work, and the degree program actually has been really its shining star. I think it's allowed interdisciplinary work to a different level than what we've seen before. And I think it's the interdisciplinary work, especially in this field where weather and society are integrating, is up and coming and is getting larger and larger. And I still follow them on Facebook, and I see new students coming in every year, and it's super exciting. It's people from so many different walks of life. It's crazy. My class that I came in with, there were emergency managers, there was a geologist, I was a meteorologist. There were actually a couple firefighters that came in to do this program. So they have not only those wanting to go into academia, they have those that want to just sharpen their skills as an emergency manager. There was just a wide array of people, and the program and the center really allow you to just focus on what you want and make it what you need. So it was really cool.
Yeah, it's a really neat place to then go on to work at a place like the National Weather Service, where emergency managers, broadcast meteorologists are the deep core partners. And so understanding those relationships and having that background undoubtedly serves you really well in this position. So let's get to the HAZCIMP program. Now, can you tell us just a little bit about where things stood? Eli Jacks, who you work with at the Weather Service, he was on our show a number of months ago, and he was giving us an update on the HAZCIMP program. He gave us sort of the 101 and talked a little bit about where things stood at that point. There was a survey going out to essentially assess, is there a brokenness in our system, the watch warning advisory system? Can you tell us a little bit about where things were at that time, and what did you guys learn from that study?
Yeah, so HAZCIMP has been going on for several years now, officially since 2014. So it was interesting for me to come in kind of towards the end of it, but also at a really cool phase in the project. They were actually at the point of conducting these surveys. So they had finished creating them and they were in the process of running them, and results didn't come until a few months after I arrived. So it was actually a cool place in the project. So we had been building up to these for a long time. We've been doing a lot of social science engagements and efforts over the years through workshops, case studies, focus groups to get some sense of are there ways that we can improve our, and I'll just keep saying WAWA, so I might as well define it now, watch warning advisory, or WAWA, as Eli taught me in my first couple of days in the new position. But so we were trying to figure out through these engagements, is there improvements that can be made to our WAWA system, and how much change is actually needed? What level of change is needed? So all of that work has really built upon itself, and we felt ready to test out some ideas, some prototypes with the general public, and that's where these set of surveys came from. So it was actually 11 different surveys that we tested, and each one actually focused on a different hazard. So we had a tornado survey, we had a coastal flood survey, so on and so on. Didn't focus on every single hazard, but a good wide range of them. And what's really cool about these is it was really our first chance to get some empirical evidence on public understanding of the WAWA terms as they are today, but also how people would respond to other alternative language if we were to change the terms entirely. So it was a really cool spot, a really scary spot. I was curious to see what the results would show. I think we all were, but
yeah, tell us a little bit. Oh, sorry. Well, I know Troy is sitting there with a question. It's a bit of a technical one. If you don't mind, Troy, I'll ask a general question, then we can get to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So, Danielle, can you tell us a little bit about, in those surveys, you said that there were alternate terms that were proposed and tested. Where did those come from? And can you give the audience an understanding of what kinds of terms those were? What kinds of alternatives were considered?
Yeah, so part of what all that social science engagement that we did previously, especially a workshop actually in 2015, it brought together emergency managers, broadcast meteorologists, forecasters, others internal to NOAA, and also social scientists as well. And that big 4-day workshop actually really created the meat of the survey and what the prototype language was that we were going to test. And we broke everyone out into groups, and we had them just basically blow up the WAWA system. And, if they were to create a whole new system, what would it look like? And they all created different prototypes. There was all different opinions. And they really centered around tiered systems, hierarchical systems, using different adjectives like minor, moderate, major. They also utilize color. So yellow, orange, red, or other types of colors. And there was just some other terms that people thought of that may be more intuitive or in general better than watch, warning, and advisory. So we coalesced around 4 prototypes that we ended up testing within the generalizable public surveys, as we call them.
Great. Go for it, Troy.
Well, one question I was going to ask Danielle, Troy Kimmel here. It's nice to get the chance to meet you. One thing that I'm kind of getting the feeling in talking to Weather Service folks, and particularly some people at regional offices and so forth, is that we're trying, the Weather Service, although I've never heard it officially stated, the Weather Service is trying to avoid the word possible. Now, this is what I'm hearing, that word is, they're trying to avoid that. And by your nod, I assume that's something you've heard before, at least, because really, in a way, anything is possible. I mean, I can sort of understand that where we're coming from, but there's been something happen that James and I have talked about, and Kim and I very briefly have talked about. And to me, it's interesting, and I want to get yours and also Kim's view on this. The Weather Service office up in Memphis is the only Weather Service office in the United States that is right now in their tornado warnings. They have gone into WarnGen, and WarnGen's a program that they use to create the warnings to transmit them out. But they've gone into what I call asterisk number 3, the third one, and everyone knows what that is. That's at 5:02 p.m. Doppler radar indicates this. It's that part of the warning. And what they've done in Memphis is they have eliminated the word capable of. They've eliminated that 2 words from a warning. And I mean in every tornado warning. Radar indicated 80% of them are radar indicated, and they've eliminated that so that the warning reads, Doppler radar indicates a severe thunderstorm producing a tornado was located over Memphis, we'll say for instance. It does not use the word capable of anymore. Now, I personally don't believe that the word capable is the same thing as possibly. And especially when you look at the bottom of those warnings and it says radar indicated. What's the radar indicating? It's indicating a mesocyclone in most cases. How often do they produce tornadoes? 20% or less of the time. And we've got these warnings which are saying a severe thunderstorm producing a tornado, no qualification with it is producing a tornado. I'm looking for a local storm report when that comes out. And I'm wondering, Danielle, and you too, Kim, because I've had the chance to work with you before. Is this good? Is this sort of where we're going with this? I kind of got a feeling that it makes the public think, okay, there is a tornado there, when I could be willing to bet you that in 80% of the cases there may not be. Just wondering if you've heard of this before, what Memphis is doing. Is that a direction in which we're going?
Would you like me to start, Kim?
Yeah, go for it. And I'm actually thinking he's probably teed up an example of one of the prototypes that was considered revolved around this idea of increasing amounts of certainty. So this is an attribute. That's really what he's talking about, is communicating confidence, or communicating uncertainty, the flip side, and being comfortable doing that.
Yeah. So I guess I'd first ask, what made them change the language? What was that decision built off of? Was there an issue that they were seeing in their forecast area that caused them to change the language? So that would kind of be a question to them. But
and Danielle, Gary Woodall is a good friend. He's a great WCM. He has his roots here in Texas, and I know Gary really well. We haven't had a chance to really talk about it, but to me, I guess as a broadcast meteorologist in the past and working more in emergency management now, if I hear that a thunderstorm is producing a tornado, I'm looking for a local storm report, or I'm looking at NWS chat to confirm that it's there. And in these cases out of Memphis, it's there even in radar indicated cases, and especially in the South. I don't know, maybe in that Dixie Alley, this is fine. This is an area which they're finding that works a little better. I don't know.
I mean, it's really interesting. I think you raise a point that the HAZCENT program is kind of struggling with. What is the importance of the words, what we call a thing? If it's, say a tornado warning or a red warning for a tornado, for example, that's one of the prototypes that was considered the colors Danielle was talking about. It's not just about the label. The words aren't the only thing that we're communicating. You've highlighted that in the warning text, there's something where forecasters have traditionally tried to indicate their confidence level, their amount of certainty, in this case, that a tornado exists, and what evidence their assuredness rests on, whether it's a spotter report or something like radar evidence. And as radar technologies are developing, we are seeing the emergence of things like radar confirmed, where we feel like there's a strong enough signature where we see debris actually being lofted that can be confirmatory where the eyes can't see.
But Kim, but this is in every tornado warning from
Right.
Memphis, Tennessee, from the WFO. It's from every warning. And I wonder if at some point people are going to get so tired of hearing that, and maybe 80% of the cases, a mesocyclone may not produce, is not going to produce a tornado less than 20% of the time. I just wonder if people are going to get burned out on that.
Yeah, why?
So I would ask, actually,
I know. I was changing it right now.
Sorry. Did I interrupt someone?
You're good.
I was gonna say, you mentioned if people are gonna kind of get fed up on it. It's obviously, the public is not always just looking only at our, as Kim said, not only looking at just our headlines and our product text. They're also hearing what the broadcasters are telling them, their emergency managers are telling them, friends and family. So I'd be curious to know, if this change has trickled down. So how is it getting communicated outward by our partners and stakeholders, or is it? Is that change getting communicated?
Well, one thing too, Danielle, to follow up on something you mentioned, and I don't know, James, correct me if I'm wrong, but this deal of color is driving me crazy as someone out here.
Crazy.
No, and it's not a far trip. The bottom line is we have colors being established by SPC that some of the WFOs are not using for threat areas. The color thing is confusing. Everyone's got to get on board, or the color thing is just sort of a mess right now, in my opinion.
I think we're jumping ahead.
Right? Yeah. This is really great.
Well, as a broadcaster, I'm interested in that too, because Danielle, you guys must have had some discussions about, okay, we're going to set, if you do set a bunch of colors and then broadcasters in particular wander off, you don't really have any authority to come down and, and wrap them on the knuckles and say, you need to be using these colors, or do you?
No. They're partners. They have every right to use whatever colors they want to use. Now, not to say that there isn't value in trying to make things more consistent and work together, but you're right. There is, we don't have that control over it.
Well, that's one of the things. We have Weather Service offices which are not using the same colors as SPC, from what I understand. Yes. Yep.
There are definitely concerns when it comes to consistency and color schemes, and how much is already out there. Yeah.
And I agree with you completely. The consistency is the way we've got to go.
This is one of the things that obviously makes this so hard for you guys. And I was lucky enough to be when you were in Norman, when you were there on your tour around the country. But how are you going to process or deal with the simple fact that everybody's got a different opinion on this?
Man, you guys are just jumping right in, aren't you?
Yeah. I have to do the Fox show, so I got to go in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. There are so many opinions, and so part of the social science process has been trying to be systematic about things and to gather empirical evidence and to build each effort on itself. So we kind of let everyone have their opinions and really pulled out all that feedback over the years leading up to the set of public surveys. And so these public surveys were meant to test viable prototype options. But it wasn't just that we looked, when we analyzed these survey results, these public survey results, we didn't just look at how this prototype performed or that prototype performed. We looked across levels. So what word is promoting better protective action at the watch level, at the advisory level, and so on. So we were able to glean some really interesting results from these surveys. And as you were just mentioning, we ended up taking the results of these surveys and taking them back out to our stakeholders and forecasters and understanding how a change might impact them, and just kind of going full circle and getting back to them about this.
And what did you find? And I'm gonna ask the question, then I have to go do this show. But I'm interested to go back and listen to your answer. You went around the country. You did what, 9 or 10 or 11 meetings in various Weather Service forecast office, and then there was an online thing with a bunch of broadcasters. Mm-hmm. and some of it's EMA too, but obviously I'm in the broadcast camp. So what did you find from the broadcasters that, number one, surprised you that you guys didn't, maybe consider that the broadcasters wanted, or anything around what the broadcasters' responses were? And as they say in talk radio, I'll hang up and listen.
They were, it varied. It varied depending on the location, but I would say it just surprised me how incredibly flexible they were. They were ready to roll with anything, and they're like, we'll make it work. We're here to tell a story, and your words will hopefully help facilitate that. So they were fairly flexible. The broadcasters tended to be the group that wanted the simplest. They wanted a simple system that was streamlined and uncomplicated. So they did tend to shy away from the colors more than others. Though I would say that very few felt a lot of positive vibes toward using color in the headlines. But the broadcasters liked the simpler the better. And overall, they were just really flexible.
Jordan, you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, I was just I would like the discussion, everything going on. My senior capstone group, one thing we've been doing, and Kim, you guys may know a little bit about this, but we're working with the Weather Service office in Norman, and there was an event back in last year where they used the Newsy graphics. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. And what they did was we sent out a survey of it when it break, and we asked people, okay, so you see this graphic, let's say, and basically it showed the state of Oklahoma, western Oklahoma, and we asked for two locations, Lawton and Clinton. And what we did was we asked them, what do you feel like your risk level is? And would you take shelter? Would you not take shelter? What type of action would you take if you saw this? And one thing that we found, we're still analyzing all the data, but one thing that we found, and I think you guys can probably attest to this, is that one set of our surveys used colors yellow and red, and the other set used yellow and orange. And one thing we've noticed already is that the orange color reduces confidence. People are a lot less confident when it came to the orange color compared to the red. We saw, I think there was one graphic, I'm trying to recall exactly what it said, but we had almost a 90% of people saying they should take shelter when it was yellow and red. But then when it was yellow and orange, that number dropped to like 60%. And, it was kind of the same message, but that confidence of how do I perceive this color, the confidence was a lot less when it was orange compared to red, and so I just thought maybe that'd be interesting to add as we're kind of discussing colors and perception. It does seem like that colors do play a really huge impact in how people see something and how they perceive it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really cool study. It sounds awesome. And it's true. They do seem to have an impact. Orange warning and red warning actually in place of advisory and warning. So kind of using a color hierarchy in that approach that actually tested well in our public surveys. And that tested well in that it promoted a jump in action basically from orange to red. So it's kind of along the lines of what you're saying there. But I will add, though, that now having been through 26 focus groups, actually, we finally counted them all. We did find that while color within headlines didn't really play well with a lot of our stakeholders and forecasters, we did find that it was a good supplementary tool. So color can't be everything. It can't tell the person everything they need to know, but it can be supplementary and give them that extra push of information that allows them to make a better decision. So that tended to be what we heard within our focus groups, that we're not sure how we feel about having the word orange or red within our headlines, but using color as a tool can be really powerful if it's used in the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interestingly enough, in my dissertation, I think this is, in my personal belief on how color should be used, is exactly that, as a supplementary cue, something that can help people to digest information. I really worry that people will hear this and think, oh, we have to make everything red. And the motivation being that we need to inspire behavior because we want to control it, or at least persuade. And I don't think that that's necessarily what our behavioral objective should be, as we say in the social sciences. So Danielle, one of the things you're wrestling with in your program is, well, there's things we can do to motivate people, but there's also things we can do to communicate clearly. Those are different kinds of objectives. I think where I come down is I want to inform decision-making. I want to help calibrate people to the risk appropriately. So in my dissertation research, I used color. I was looking at probabilistic graphics. So if we were to take tornado warnings and give people the shades of certainty that we have about that, if we give them just the numbers, I found that people did better if we had the numbers with color with it. So if you have like 100%, make that red, and then either desaturate it or go toward a blue or something. And that cue to that is just an additional little something that helped people to understand what the number really meant in the context of risk. Because we all know, at least in the US, risk carries the like this notion of red as a color that comes to mind. That's the primary like alert, red. It actually is very meaningful that in our system, we display tornado with red in the Weather Service. We sort of implicitly indicate that this is the threat that we think is the most important of the severe suite, and the others share some other color. We've prioritized it in that way. So much, how deeply red is embedded in our culture when it comes to thinking about risk. I've really enjoyed, by the way, the cuckoo clock sound in the back of that. Yes,
Thanks,
it does sound
Shut
creepy,
up.
I know. But yeah, I think, Danielle, I really appreciate that that's where you guys landed with that you're wrestling now with, red can motivate protective action. Not everything should necessarily be red. It's really, we have to be clear about what the colors are supposed to imply. Are we trying to say code for gradations of certainty in the existence of a hazard? Are we trying to encode for the severity of the hazard? Those are totally different things. And if we start to use these colors for everything, I think that's where things get off the rails with HazSimp. Exactly. If we use these colors for everything, we use them effectively for nothing. And that's why our watch warning advisory system is a chiclet map. You look at the national map and it's just meaningless. You have no idea what's going on just by looking at that map alone. Even me looking at, I've been in this for how many years? I looked at it this past weekend and just thought, I have to go and look at synoptic maps myself to even know what weather type this is that's occurring with these, especially mid-latitude cyclones and all the attendant hazards. It's just, it's very difficult to use that alone and to get it right. So Danielle, you were telling us some of the findings then from the focus groups. And when you say that broadcasters preferred something simple, okay, so they don't like color. What kinds of things were simple alternatives that were preferred or enjoyed by some of the stakeholder groups?
So we, obviously we got a wide range of, again, thoughts, opinions. We did try and structure these focus groups. So we had them we stepped them through scenarios with the prototypes, with the favored ones that came out of the public survey. And we tried to ask them questions on, how would a change like this impact your operations? How would it impact your decision making? That sort of thing, rather than get them a little bit past the just do you like it or don't you like it? So we asked some of those types of questions in all of our focus groups. And just to clarify, we did focus groups with forecasters, emergency managers, broadcast media, and also other types of specialized user groups depending on the location. We did mariners in a couple of locations. We also worked with some of the tribal leaders up in Alaska. So we got some really cool feedback. But to answer your question, though, we got a wide array of feedback from everyone. I would say the themes out of it were that, again, the color within the headlines, so actually written out as orange warning, red warning, they shared actually a lot of the concerns that you already expressed, Kim, when it comes to all the color schemes that are already out there and maybe not being a positive thing, but possibly being more confusing. So that was a concern, even though they did like color as a supplementary type of tool. we actually got one of the surprising things to me was that we got really positive feedback on the term notice in place of watch. I was expecting watch to be so deeply institutionalized that everyone would laugh at us when we said, let's get rid of watch and make it notice instead. But surprisingly, people had a positive vibe around it. They would say things like, well, you put someone on notice, or you give me advance notice. So there actually was a positive vibe around that word that kind of surprised me. But I will caveat that, saying that it is pretty deeply institutionalized in culture and policy, particularly for the severe and tropical hazards. When we said tornado notice or hurricane notice, people started to get a little more antsy than if we said winter weather notice. So that was interesting. It was different depending on different hazards. Some of this to do with how short fuse, long fuse, or some also discussed international implications. So for the tropical system, if we changed hurricane watch to hurricane notice, how would that influence or impact Caribbean nations? So, is there going to be some international inconsistency there? And that's something that came up in the focus groups that, maybe we thought of, but really hit home when they discussed that with us. So definitely some interesting discussion around the term notice, both positive and negative. So strengths and weaknesses there. And finally, one of the prototypes that we proposed in these focus groups and gathered feedback around was removing the advisory level. So currently we have watch, warning, and advisory. And as we've said on previous episodes with Eli, there's this orthogonal logic between the three terms. So, which is worse? Is it watch, warning, advisory? Advisory is a lower level warning, and a watch is letting you know about a warning. It gets very confused and jumbled. And that ended up showing through in our public surveys, where not only was advisory the least understood term, but it was actually consistently confused with watch. So, for instance, in the winter survey, 14% of people correctly defined advisory. 60% of them actually chose the watch definition. So there is a lot of evidence of confusion between these three terms. So what we proposed as one of our prototypes in the focus groups was to remove it and just have notice, warning, and an emergency level as needed. So this prototype played differently depending on the stakeholder group and the location. Some were all for removing the advisory level. Others felt like they really needed that information still, and it tended to depend on whether or not it was like a trigger point for them in their own work. So it was an interesting discussion around removing advisory.
Yeah, so all this time there's been so much concern that people are confusing watch and warning. Really, what's happening is they're confusing advisory and watch.
Yeah. I mean, not to say that there wasn't evidence of watch and warning confusion as well, but it really seems like the advisory term is the one that's mucking up the mix, basically.
We have a problem down here in the deep south of winter storms. So you've got a winter storm watch, and that changes to a winter weather advisory, and people immediately think that's a downgrade, and nothing's going to happen. I mean, that happened with Snowmageddon. In Atlanta and over here. And I will totally agree. It's a problem, especially at least down here in the deep south with winter weather issues.
Yeah. Absolutely.
A quick question for you from Austin way down here. What about those lower impact things like wind advisories or fog advisories, dense fog advisories? Would those be fog warnings? Would they be wind warnings?
Yeah, so you make an interesting point here. Okay, so we're getting rid of all of these advisories that are out there, and we counted them. We have 23, I think, advisories. So there's a lot, and not all of them lead to a warning, too. So we have advisories that are standalone, I guess you would say, like small advisory for mariners, or the dense fog advisory. So these are not associated with a watch and a warning, making it all the more confusing, of course. And you make a good point here. What would we do with these advisories? Would they just go away? Would we still let people know about these situations? And I think that's one of the things that we really wrestled with in these focus groups, and drew a lot of attention and time when we were with our stakeholder groups and our forecasters. So yeah, we have to figure out if we were to remove advisory as one of those kind of flagship WAWA headlines. So now it's not WAWA anymore, it's just the WW. What would that look like in our system? And I think one of the themes that came out from the focus groups around this discussion was that, we do still need that advisory level information to get out. We need it to get out to our public and our stakeholders and our partners. But perhaps we don't need it as one of the flagship headlines. So, in fact, having it alongside watch and warning can confuse things even further. And just like you said, it appears like it's a downgrade when it goes from a watch to advisory, when that's not what the forecaster necessarily would want to be conveying. So, is there a way to get this information out without having the National Weather Service issued a blank, basically?
Thank you.
I'm struggling with this. No answers yet.
Danielle, this is John up in Pennsylvania, the northeast capital of manure. You have to get used to it up here. It's pretty frequent. So my question deals with vocabulary and our use of vocabulary. When I covered the May 3rd, 99 outbreak in the plains, that was the first time the Weather Service in Norman used the terminology tornado emergency. And I remember reading that, and boy, did that get my attention. So much so, I thought it was an error. I didn't think that was real. So the use of terminology like that was picked up by the Weather Service office in Galveston and Houston prior to Hurricane Ike. And I believe it's the first time, at least for me, the first time I ever read, if you do not evacuate, you will die. What do you think about the future of using vocabulary like that in tornado warnings, or for that matter, any kind of warning, to try to generate the kind of reaction we want?
Well, a couple of things. You made a good point with the emergency. We actually, as part of these prototypes that we went forward with, and what we also tested in our public surveys, was expanding the use of the word emergency, or of the term emergency. So right now we do only use it as a tag, from a technical way of saying it, as a tag on our warnings, and only for flash flood warning and tornado warning. So those two hazards can basically get an upgrade to an emergency if needed in a very high impact, very rare circumstances. But what we were proposing is that it be extended to all hazards. So not necessarily all the time, still in that rare high impact situation, but it doesn't just have to be tornado and flash flood anymore. It could be a high wind scenario, or it could be a winter scenario, or perhaps an eye wall coming on shore. It's an extreme wind warning, could become an emergency situation. So that was something we actually floated during our focus groups. And we got some feedback on that, mainly positive, but with the caveat that we should be cautious. And that sort of language can potentially get overused. So that was something that our stakeholders and forecasters consistently told us to just be cautious of, to not overuse that sort of language or that term. It could basically become the new warning.
Yeah, or the new red.
And that's one of my concerns, is that people hear, well, this is not a tornado emergency. It's no big deal. It's just a tornado warning. I don't need to do anything. And that's one of my concerns, is that if we overuse emergency, then people don't listen to warnings anymore. So
yep. Yeah. And that is something we heard. Yep.
Mm-hmm. It's striking, John, with what you were talking about with the language, the certain death language. That was recently attempted in impact-based warnings, and it's interesting. I was talking to Mike Hudson, who works at Central Region Headquarters and helped to architect impact-based warnings. And something, we were at the National Weather Association's Severe Storms Conference this past week. And something that he talked about was that they learned through that program, they did want, they intended to motivate action by putting out that word choice. What they found is really in the social science of warning response, that wasn't necessarily the track that they wanted to take, because if you make people a little bit afraid or concerned, that can help promote protective response. But if you get them to the point where they're too afraid, then people, instead of doing response-focused coping with the situation, they do emotion-focused coping. And so they're actually less likely to engage. They're more likely to do things that aren't necessarily in the interest of their safety, because they're too afraid. So they found that language really was leaning a little bit more that direction. And there's something else important about that language to consider. It's not necessarily truthful. And this is something I found the field of meteorology doesn't necessarily know, but my whole talk at NWA that kicked off this conversation with Mike was about tornado epidemiology. And I know this is specific about just tornadoes. I'm taking the whole, track, but that's where impact-based warnings really came from. I don't think meteorologists really know that that's not certain death. If you get into an F4 or F5 tornado situation, 98 to 99% of the people who are encountering that damage live. And that's in the Moore 99 tornado, that's in Joplin, that's on April 27th, 2011. You really have to look at it not by counting the number of fatalities, but count the number of fatalities divided by the total number of people exposed. I don't know why this isn't better known in our field. The epidemiology, I think, would actually be really helpful for us to communicate safety. The certain death tag is not only does it promote fear that might be a little bit hard for people to handle, but it's not necessarily warranted, and it's not necessarily empowering. So something I'm trying to take to the streets is we should consider promoting the message that these are imminently survivable situations. All you need to do is get to something a little bit better. And we've talked a lot for the last couple of weeks about mobile manufactured homes. You need to get to something a little bit better than that, and your odds just dramatically increase to almost perfect. I mean, hearing that should be enormously motivational. If you think that you're going to die if you're not underground, you're not going to want to get to something that's just a little bit better, because you'll think it's hopeless. So that's kind of what I mean. Sorry, that was a total detour, but that certain death language, I think, is something that it's really a part of our culture in the field, and it's something interesting that we should try to confront. And
I preach on, sister, because if I hear that, then what are we doing? Well, let's just turn the transmitter off. Let's just go back to regular programming. Let's run, Freak of the Week or America's Dancing or whatever here, and let's not even cover tornadoes because it's certain death. There's no hope. I mean, that's a horribly that's not true. It's a lie. It's not certain death. Could there be fatalities? Yes. But most people within the path of even a strong, violent tornado survive. And what are you trying to tell people? Stick your head between your legs and kiss your butt goodbye. That's a horrible message. It's bad.
It's terrible. And in Oklahoma, what's happening now? I wish that Rick Smith was here because he's confronting this all the time now as severe weather season is looming. There are people in this state who, after the 2013 tornadoes, where they were hearing this certain death messaging over and over again, they came away traumatized. We have people who are experiencing real post-traumatic stress disorder, where days ahead, if there's severe weather that's forecasted, they are beating down Rick's door, anyone's door that they can, frightened, just terrified of trying to find a way to stay safe. This is real. I mean, this is a consequence of our messaging that I really think we should deal with and confront. When you tell people that there's certain death, that is part of what's going to happen. There are consequences to what we're doing. So just something to think about. Transitioning back to HasSint more explicitly, it strikes me that I know that there's not necessarily a perfect fix for this that's been identified, but something that we're dealing with in the lab as we're dealing with trying to develop probabilistic technologies is everything you're talking about is actually something to put on the same scale. Advisories, tornado emergencies, what you're talking about is gradations in the severity that's anticipated. So what if we turn the system on its head a little bit and don't just rely on these marquee products to convey everything? What if we try to communicate the likelihood that we'll get to different levels of severity? So this is something that we've actually found in our test bed as we brought in people like Troy, is that our prototype products first were, what's the probability of reaching a severe thunderstorm warning? And emergency managers were like, well, I want to know the probability of getting that extreme event. I don't just want the garden variety, like 65 mile an hour. What about the probability of this getting to be 90 mile an hour? What about the probability of this just being 30 miles an hour? You might have complete certainty that's going to be just 30 miles an hour. Forecasters have no way to say that right now through a product. So this is a dimension that goes a little bit outside of HasSimp in that it's not just relying on the words in the system, that architecture to convey these ideas. What if we took another direction and tried to think about ways to say, you know, the most likely event is this storm stays around like, you know, it's just sub-severe, but there's a maybe 10% chance this thing could be, you know, in the next hour, it could become like a 90 mile an hour wind event. That's really what we want, I think, because we want people to be looking out for the worst case scenario, but not necessarily thinking that's all that there is. If you feel like you see the worst case scenario on the horizon as a possibility, you might feel like I have to hit the red button just to make people aware, even if your confidence is really low. That's putting forecasters into a kind of trap that I don't think they want to be in. And I think you promote, you know, the sort of false alarm effect, the repeated false alarm effect that way. So I suggest, you know, humbly, that maybe a way out of this is improving the way that we communicate uncertainty and including severity as part of that, improving the ways that we communicate gradations in severity.
Yeah, you know, Kim, you make such a good point. And I would say, you know, I think that's one of our biggest lessons learned thus far through the whole HasSimp project. And, you know, I'm deviating a little bit from what you said, but it's still at the heart of it. The WAWA terms, watch, warning, and advisory, cannot be everything to everyone. We can't put that on their shoulders. You know, we can't put that on these terms to do everything, to communicate all the uncertainty and severity and package it nicely and neatly and convey it through one word. Yeah. It's not going to happen. You know, we found that there's no perfect set of words that's going to, you know, like you said earlier, make everyone do what you want them to do. And as you said, that shouldn't be our goal. It's not our goal really. But what we found is that the WAWA terms are just one tool in our toolbox, essentially. You know, and that's one way that we disseminate information to the public, to partners. It's a pretty visible tool. It's a pretty public tool. But again, the bottom line is these words are not going to be everything to everyone. And headlines really can't work alone. They don't work alone. You know, people are getting weather information from all different ways now, from different mediums, different sources. And even within the Weather Service internally, we have different ways of getting the information out. It's not just these terms, it's also decision support services, which we have been, you know, trying to improve and expand on for years now and are doing a pretty incredible job at. We have our forecasts, we have so much there kind of under the hood that's always out there, giving you more detailed, more personalized information beyond what these terms can do. But what I like to say with HasSimp, which is of course focused on WAWA, I want these headlines to facilitate the overall process. So all of that, it works within it. It works in concert, hopefully, with all of those other things we're doing as a weather service. So that's how we are now trying to view this. You know, we're not trying to make the perfect set of words that's going to fix everything. We're trying to come up with a set of words that's going to facilitate the overall process and that's going to you know, act as those trigger points while understanding that there is, you know, continuous stream of information happening below that as well. So
you guys have learned so much about the nature of our system by doing this. It's a you know, a real soul searching moment for our field as a whole, and a really interesting time when, as you said, you know, the means of communicating are changing so rapidly. So the way that these words are being leveraged is really important to consider. What's next? How do you come through to the other side of this and wrap this up?
You know, that's the question, isn't it?
Mhm.
What's going on next? So we have a lot of analyzing and summarizing to do, and not only of our focus groups that we literally just completed last week, actually, but we want to think holistically. We've done 5 years of research now on HasSimp, and we need to figure out what it's all told us. It's not one single effort. It's not what the public survey told us or what a set of focus groups told us. It's everything. And that's a lot, so that's going to take some time to piece through. And it's not going to be an easy choice. It might be an iterative choice where we work towards a goal. We also have to weigh all the benefits and cost to our institution, to our stakeholders, to our partners, and really consider this from all angles. So, next steps, I would say it's doing that analysis and really digging in and getting some sort of internal consensus. We'll speak to NWS leadership, and we'll hopefully come to some sort of consensus on a proposed path forward to get us to that next step. Once we get to that, there's a lot of going under the hood. How would a change in these terms affect all the other stuff I just talked about? How would we have to change our policy so that forecasters could make sure they're doing the best jobs that they can? What sort of technical considerations are there to changing these terms? For those of you that are more savvy with the tech side of things, you might think about how our VTECs will change. Basically, they're letting you know what product we're issuing. Also dissemination, if we're going to go towards a set of words that maybe doesn't have color within it, but we want to incorporate color in some way, how would that work? What would it look like? What other sort of dissemination concerns are there? Are changes to EAS, to what goes across the weather radios? There's a lot of things that our WAWA terms touch, and that's something we're really going to have to think about going forward. And actually, while we were in Norman, we had the chance to sit down with Kim and others from her team to start talking about the hazardous weather test bed and seeing if there was a opportunity there for HasSimp and to test out some of its ideas a little bit further.
Good.
And where does facets fit in with HasSimp?
I would say HasSimp is kind of part of that. It's a side of that. Maybe Kim can talk to it better, but I consider HasSimp a part of facets in a lot of ways, or deeply connected.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's really the issue that we were just revolving around with. The headlines can't do everything, but they can be part of the picture. If we do move to a future where we're doing more communicating of uncertainty, or communicating the gradations and things like severity we anticipate and how likely those different outcomes are, these things really should move hand in hand. So there's a real desire, if we're going to move forward with HasSimp, we want to change the system in such a way that it is a facilitator of that change that could come just a little bit later. We'd hate to turn the system on its head twice. Whatever change is made now, if there is going to be a structural change, it could be a generational change. This is not small. Yeah. This is going to be a commitment, as we say in hair, it's a commitment cut. we need to figure this out before we decide. So yeah, they're trying to march hand in hand. Danielle and I are trying to make them somewhat hand in hand. It's very hard to get your mind around it all. And Kevin was talking about this. Just being in the focus groups, Kevin was like, my head hurts.
Yeah. That brings up an interesting question, though. Are there any other industries or models that have made big systemic changes like that you can look to and learn from?
Maybe our terrorism alerts that didn't go over too well. Right. That's one of the big changes that I remember in near term that we could maybe learn some lessons from.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of who would have gone through that. That just came to my mind, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
And let me ask one question too about all these focus groups. Are they concentrated in one part of the country, or are you getting a good sample from different sections of the United States? As you know, there's huge cultural differences from point A to point B.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I always throw in the caveat for these focus groups that they're meant to generate themes, to uncover issues that we haven't thought of. They're not meant for quantitative analysis to figure out how many people want this prototype or that prototype. So they do have their limitations in that regard, just as a methodology. But we did try and spread them out. I will say that we attempted to go to every Weather Service region, being that there's 6. We did not end up getting to all of them, mostly because of the government shutdown. So that curtailed a couple of our plans, and we weren't able to recover them. But we've supplemented in other ways. I can list them off. We've been to Anchorage, Alaska. We've been out to Norman. We went down to Miami and worked with the Hurricane Center a bit, along with the WFO stakeholders. We went to Louisville, and let's see, I'm missing some. We went to Sterling. It's right next to us. And we went down to Wakefield and Norfolk. So we did try to spread things out a little bit. And we also tried to, like I said earlier, dig into some of those more specialized user groups that might not, some of their feedback and opinions might not come through when we just talk to, say, a group of emergency managers. So we did dig into, mariner groups, and like in Alaska, we talked to tribal leaders. We also talked to some school officials and transportation officials as well. So we did try and do a pretty wide range. We did 26 focus groups in all.
And I guess the next question is we've learned here, and I think this is true in much of the country, people can't find their house on a map.
Nope.
What do we do about that?
That's not a problem I can solve.
Well, that's what social scientists do. So we use maps. We all use maps, and we're posting these easy to understand 4th grade level maps, and people can't understand them. So right away you get what about? They want a personal forecast for their town because they honestly can't find their house on a map. It's mind-boggling, and I'm having to rethink everything I do. I didn't know it was this bad. We think about 85% of the people can't put a dot within 50 miles of their house on a blank map. And this is a big problem here.
Well, the United States, James, we're geographically ignorant. We're a geographically ignorant country.
Right.
Okay.
Geography literacy is a big problem here.
Yeah. So at what level, Kim and Danielle, do you say, and I'm playing devil's advocate because that's my thing here, but at what point, at what level do you say, at some point people have to take care of themselves?
Well, I think it goes right to what Kim said, where our goal should not be to make them do something or what we think that they should do. It really is about facilitating their decision-making process. We're giving them good information. What they do with it, no, we can't control. The goal of social science is never to control people. It just never is.
Well, unless you're evil, like I am.
Well, there's a niche for all of us.
It's so interesting.
You're right. I mean, I've heard someone say before over dinner, someone in our field, we can't save everyone. They've got to be a personal. There's got to be a personal responsibility. People must accept a little responsibility of saving themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that the informed decision-making goal is all about putting it on the individual shoulders to make those decisions. As long as we have, assured that people receive the message, that they understand it, and that they understand what they can do about it, which I think that's just as problematic, for example, with tornadoes. If people don't understand just how survivable they are, they don't know, they're not going to respond well because they don't know how well they could fare by making a small change. If we have those 3 things in place, though, then it really is in the hands of the individuals. And we can't control things like poverty. That is certainly beyond our grasp. But we can try to help people understand that even if they find themselves in poverty, they could there be interpersonal relationships they leverage, to get to something a little bit better? Could there be community programs developed to reach those people? Could there be technologies that help open up the response timeline where some of those things become practical? I think we can meet in the middle. I think that we meet in the middle. It's not all on us. and it's not, just on them. There's really a middle ground where we can inform, and then we do have to have the ability to say this is all we can do.
What strikes me as a huge challenge in this project that we're talking about, and my hat is off to all of you involved in this, because I think it's an incredible challenge, is that the end users have variable tolerances with respect to risk and variable tolerances with respect to experience. And that is a moving target that changes all the time. So how do you develop a product for this moving target? I'm floored by it.
That is what blows my mind. People have free will, so it's not that even whatever we'd find, even if we were to do a place-based examination where everyone in the country, we got a handle on what everyone believed, it's going to change depending on the next hurricane season, the next severe weather season, the next winter, at least to some degree. We know that happens. So yeah, it's very hard to get tailored quite that finely. That's a real issue. I think, again, it's all about returning to understanding rather than trying to just motivate a behavior. But yeah, that's the challenge right there. That's going to keep us employed, Danielle, for our whole careers.
I've truly been humbled by HasSimp, but it's like, it's true. I think our absolute biggest challenge from a high level is just that our audience is 300 million people. Our audience is the entire U.S. population. How do you work with that? What do you do? And that's where I think we had that kind of coming to the light moment where we were like, these terms cannot be everything. They have to work within a broader system here. And I think HasSimp has really been about trying to find ways to improve things rather than trying to solve everything. Where can these terms, our product text, these headlines, where can they make a difference? Where can we get the most bang for our buck? How can we remove things that are causing a lot of issues? How can we add something that could really, cause a lot of benefit? And so that's where we're kind of weaving in and out. And it's not just about changing these terms. We've done a lot of what we've called consolidation and reformatting as well. We consolidated and reformatted our winter product suite and are working on it for our others as well. But we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that. One of the biggest things we continued to hear fairly early on in the project was, it would go a long way if you just started dealing with those 120 some products. Just deal with that a little bit, and then also, simplify your text. It may be bulleted. Have it be a little bit more clear, easier to read, and so we've worked on that. That's been a place where we've been able to make positive change, and you have to take those wins, and we're doing the best we can. So,
Danielle, I have a question for you real quick. And I thought about this after I was in the Sterling group that you guys did. And I thought about this afterwards. Have you guys, with the public surveys, were those strictly on paper? Have you been able to do any sort of video presentation of these new type of alerts to see if there was a difference in the interpretation between reading it on paper and actually seeing a broadcaster present?
Yeah, that is probably one of the biggest limitations of that set of public surveys, is that it was all just text. So they read the National Weather Service has issued a winter storm warning. What would you do? I'm simplifying it, of course, but that's the general sense. So they don't get the fuller context. They are obviously in the actual situation in real life. They'd be getting weather information from everywhere. They'd be getting our products filtered, through our partners who are translating that information to them and putting it in different graphical, visual ways. So we weren't able to get to that. And that is a limitation. And that is one area where I feel like the hazardous weather testbed could maybe really help us out with refining even some of the policy requirements around whatever this new system could look like. So.
Well, I'm just curious if even the wording would if people like where they picked where they didn't like possible compared to advisory and things like that, if that would be different when they heard it versus when they read it on paper.
Very well could be.
Just
that is one of the limitations of that type of survey. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, just really quickly, we're considering in the test bed trying to put, so Aubrey, you participated in the broadcaster experiment last year with some of our probabilistic products. We're thinking about, well, can we put this in front of members of the public? How it is that you ended up using them, see what they think, versus an ordinary broadcast and testing that, because the public haven't been brought into the test bed yet. So you ask just a really good question that we're struggling with.
Yeah.
All right, so we've kept Danielle for way over an hour here, and we've got to take a quick break here. So Danielle and for Kim, both of you, if anybody wants to provide input, is there a way of doing that? Their thoughts on HasSimp? What's the best way to communicate with you on this issue?
So first of all, we have a website, which I don't know if you guys do show notes or anything?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So in the show notes, I can give you our website, which actually has all the reports of all the social science I've been talking about. So if you want to have some really great light reading before bed, you can dig into all of them. But I can also provide contact information too.
Okay, awesome. And plug your podcast, Danielle.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, go.
If you're interested in budgeting as a couple, come on over, budgetcouple.com. My husband and I for 2 years now, I think, have been just doing bi-weekly podcasts on how we budget and what some of our goals and tips and tricks are. So it's pretty short and sweet and informal, but fun.
Okay, budgetcouple.com, or I guess you can search it out on any podcast client.
Yeah, any
right?
of the podcast sites, you can get it. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for your time. And Kim, thanks for arranging for Danielle to be on the show.
Thank you, Dan.
Great discussion.
We could keep this going for like all night, but we have a funny feeling you would not appreciate that. So,
oh yeah, I'm getting a little tired. Okay.
Yeah. All right, Danielle, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys. Bye.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye. And let's see, Aubrey, can you do email? Have we got time for this for you?
I can do it.
Well, let's just see if we got anything in the good old email inbox this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right, we're going to start with Devin Greenies. Love the latest Invisibilia podcast with James Spann. 2 great podcasts coming together. And was I the only one tensing up for the buzzer when the host said climate change? Thanks, Devin.
Let me see if the buzzer still works.
Jenny Pratt sent in a email with the discussions over the last 2 episodes of the high number of deaths in manufactured homes, mobile homes, trailers, and everything. So knowing the similar Appalachian areas of southern, southeastern Ohio, let's see. Basically, she had wondered if Kim ever heard this type of response from people, if they're overwhelmed by the prospect of bad things happening to me that have a very high risk of happening. If I don't find the money to get my car fixed, I will lose my job. If I lose my job, my kids will go hungry. I might not have the physiological or emotional fortitude left to deal with these things that have a lower risk of materializing if the storm might hit my town compared to the things that could happen if, compared to if she doesn't have the money to fix a car, I will lose my job. Kim, I don't know if you had a chance to look at that email.
I hadn't yet. No, that's one of that's where they have to make that choice. We can't make it for them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Catherine Ebeling from the South Plains of Texas is missing Professor Peters. You need
the man that looks like Colonel Sanders.
Catherine needs a dose of WeatherBrains 101, even if it's a rerun.
Yeah, let me just say that, everybody comes to a point in their career. Brian's been doing this 50 years where you just want to slow down a little bit and you want to start the retirement process. And that's where Brian is. And Brian still works for us here at my television station, and he did spotter training last week. He's still very active, but he's just kind of beginning to scale back a little bit. And in fact, I had dinner with Brian before the show tonight, and so he promises he's going to come back on the show as a guest soon. So you'll get your dose of Brian soon.
All right. Well, Brian, you're missed profusely. And Jeremy Bauer sent us another great email. Also wanted to say a quick congratulations to Aubrey, that would be me, on the presentation at the Southeast Storm Symposium, which thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. A reminder to everyone that the 19th Annual University of Nebraska at Lincoln Family Weather Fest and Severe Weather Symposium, hosted by WeatherBrains 671 guest Dr. Ken Dewey, will be this Saturday, April 6th. At the Innovation Campus. The event is completely free. Speaking of photography, pleased to announce my photo of the May 27, 2018 EF2 near Federal, Wyoming was named Adorama Pick out of New York City as one of the top 100 photographs of 2018. Awesome. So, and Jeremy invites all of us to come out to the annual Weather Fest next year. So thank you, Jeremy. We appreciate that. And with that, that is email at weatherbrains.com, email at weatherbrains.com. If you have a link, a fun weather fact, a guest suggestion, a show suggestion, or maybe a cool pick of the week for us, we'd love to hear from you.
That's a good deal for him too. That picture. I mean, Adorama is a big name in photography. I buy equipment from them and purchase photographs and things like that. So anyway. Good for him. Congrats.
All right. So in goodness, Kim, I have so many questions to ask about your experience in Lee County, Alabama. Yeah. And hopefully if we have a little time, we can talk about that after we have the astronomy report. And again, we could make this show 10 hours here this week. There's so much to talk about, but let's roll. Tony Rice and the astronomy report will come back with some information on Kim on the 23 deaths in Alabama on March 3rd. Picks of the week, weather roundup, much more. We're far from over. WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
59 years ago today, the Television Infrared Observational Satellite, or TIROS-1, was launched from the Kennedy Space Center, an experiment to study the feasibility of monitoring weather patterns from space. Within hours of launch, this drum-shaped satellite, about the size of a patio table, was sending images of clouds over Maine and Canada's maritime provinces. Over the next 90 days or so, it transmitted about 23,000 images of global cloud cover. And over 19,000 of those were found to be usable by meteorologists. Though fuzzy, tardy, and hard to read by today's GO standards, much was learned from TIROS-1. Within days of launch, an image of a typhoon about 1,000 miles east of Australia was seen. A few weeks later, the wide-angle camera was centered on Kevin Selly's own Wichita Falls. It captured what was called at the time an unusual cloud mass, square in shape, that was a heavy thunderstorm which ultimately spawned tornadoes in central Oklahoma. The mission ended on June 29, 1960. When a low power fault prevented shutters on the wide-angle television camera from closing as the sun rotated into view. This permanently blinded the instrument. Now, the 80-mile wide view from the narrow-angle camera on board remained, but without the 500-mile wide context provided by the wide-angle camera, these images were of little value, and the team turned to sorting through the mountain of data that had amassed. In the end, TIROS-1 revealed a much higher degree of organization in the lows, fronts, waves, squall lines, and many other atmospheric phenomena than was expected. We knew of large-scale hurricanes and typhoons reaching over 1,000 miles in diameter at the time, but researchers were still surprised by the frequency and extent of these cyclonic storms once they got a global view. Now, TIROS-1's still up there. Unlike today's spacecraft that are built with the knowledge of space junk, it was built without much of a deorbit plan. It passes over locations between the tip of South America and about Montreal, Canada, 3 to 4 times a day. Technically, it's visible passing over, but too dim for the naked eye to see. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
So on March 3rd of this year, 23 people died in an EF4 tornado in Lee County, Alabama. And the question we have in the physical science world is why. So, Kim, what did you find? And I'm going to be like Kevin. I've got to do a newscast here, so I will be hanging up and listening as I'm driving tomorrow. And I'll let you guys close the show because I've got to do some television. But just give us a kind of a synopsis there, Kim.
Sure. Yeah, that's really the big question. Before I ever went, one of my colleagues, Stephen Strader, who we had on the show 2 weeks ago with Walker Ashley, he had really isolated the locations and the housing types for the majority of those fatalities, identifying that most of them occurred in mobile and manufactured homes. The bulk of those, I think they all actually were post 1980, so I guess they all would qualify as manufactured homes. So that's that's just part of the equation. Going through the area, though, it was really striking that it wasn't one of these communities that you think of as like even a particularly not well-off community. It was a really nice little town that these homes were nestled in, and there you drive down the road and there would be sort of permanent house, manufactured home, permanent house, large farm, sort of one of those rural farming and like sort of exurb of Auburn sorts of communities. So when we're asking the question about, is there a possibility these people could have gotten somewhere else? I think the answer is yes. An ideal situation. There were other homes available around. The question really is about, do they have access to those things? Did they have enough lead time to get there? Those kinds of questions. What I can say, something that I found that was really striking to me is that there were some people who reported that they had sheltered several times in the weeks leading up to this event. There were several waves of severe weather that went through the southern half of Alabama. And so there were people who lived in manufactured homes who told me that they had evacuated several times. And that particular day they didn't, because they were so tired of doing this. And actually, Aubrey, I went back and read the email that that had been submitted from our listener. The question was about something very similar. In her case, she was saying, emotional fatigue, that people just can't deal with this on top of the other things in their life they have to deal with. There certainly is that. I think what I was talking about earlier, trying to be very honest about, what kinds of things are survivable and how good your odds can be, can maybe help lessen in a sense of emotional fatigue. But when it comes to something like this, there is a response fatigue that maybe also could have been a part of this. And I hadn't heard that be a part of the conversation yet. So I was really intrigued by that response. I think the exact quote from someone I talked to was, she would go to her mother-in-law's house. And very often that's what happens is grandma has the permanent home and all of her family lives in these mobile homes on the property around grandma. And she was just like, I like my mother-in-law, but I don't like her that much. So that was interesting. So yeah, I did speak with some family members of the one family that had lost 9 members of their family. I believe it was 9. And they were in a situation where it sounds like for several of those fatalities, there was a whole family, many people in a manufactured home, that it was a Sunday afternoon and they were generally not super aware of what was going on. And they didn't really realize it was happening until the tornado was bearing down on them. And there's a heart-wrenching, and this has been sort of reported in media, so I'm comfortable talking about it. But the mother of the children that were killed, getting on top of them and praying and holding on to them, and then being ripped out of her arms, and oh my God, it's so terrible. It's really hard to do this research. You have to really put yourself aside. I went to they had the crosses, for all the people who were lost, and I went there first so I could cry there. And then I went in and talked to people. So anyway, it was very interesting. I think a couple of layers to this that are important to think about. There were situational factors that led to what was going on. It was, there was the timing, the Sunday afternoon thing, the antecedent severe weather. These things, even for the ideal situation of people having full knowledge of what they ought to do, which seemed to be really well socialized. There were some idiosyncrasies, and sort of were they going to get out that were going on that day. So Actually, one of the more interesting things I found, I went up the road to Auburn, 10 miles north, and I'd heard people talk about there being mobile homes surrounding Auburn that sort of had emerged in conversation after this event. And people would say, well, it's a good thing it didn't track 10 miles north because it would have been so much worse. I didn't realize just how much worse. Outside of the Auburn campus, southwest of Auburn, there, within a 1 mile span, there may be 3,000 to 4,000 manufactured homes that students are living in. That's many thousands of students.
Yep.
And that I delved into that story with the county emergency manager and with the emergency manager for the campus in Auburn, who they both are excellent. But it's just a real challenge that they have there with that population. So that's, I think that, to me, I've never seen anything like that. And if there's anything I could pinpoint that I think is probably probably the greatest vulnerability in our country, it's not a population necessarily think of as a vulnerable population, but these people aren't necessarily from the South. Right. They might not be from tornado-prone places. These communities, they look really nice too, and it looks like a fun place for students to live. I probably would have lived in one of these as a student to have my own, home sort of thing. Yeah. Some of them are gated communities, and gated manufactured housing communities, like a non sequitur that I never would have expected to see. But that's the situation. So I think, one of the things our work is really trying to dig into is there's not just one way of living in a manufactured home. There are many ways, there are many circumstances of living in a manufactured home. So all that to say, a lot of neat stuff coming out of it. I'm going to be I interviewed broadcasters, people from the Weather Service, emergency managers, and members of the public to try to understand what messaging strategies are being brought to bear for people who live in these situations, and what kinds of public programs exist, and what people on the ground are understanding and connecting the dots.
Hey, Kim, were you able to scratch the surface you said the people that were suffering from fatigue? Obviously there were severe weather events, but did anybody say, for lack of a better way to say it, I'm tired of that weatherman just trying to panic, and hype things? Was there any of that?
Fortunately, no. And I think that speaks very well. I heard zero of that. People were just, what they actually reflected on is, and it was very accurate. What they reflected on is that there are different kinds of severe weather that happen in the South. That there are just some events where you get the tornadoes that kind of come out of nowhere. They didn't say QLCS tornadoes, but that was really what they were talking about. And then you can have sort of the big supercell tornado days. And they got the sense that, what's been happening this year have been really, there's something in between where it's been hard for them to know what exactly to do. And this is where we'll say it's like the sort of slight risk, maybe marginal, slight, and enhanced risk days, where it's not necessarily clear that it's gangbusters, but it's not nothing. So these folks are really responsive to knowing that that's, for them, a sort of an important decision point where, well, maybe I could be okay if it's weak, but what kind of day is this really going to be? They were really trying to figure that out because they've had to respond to a lot of these weaker events over and over again. I was really pleased. That actually, to me, suggests they're really well calibrated and they don't feel that the forecasters have been overdoing it. They really have an accurate sense for how these events were likely to unfold. So Aubrey asked a question. I don't know if Aubrey, you want to, okay. So Aubrey puts in a question here. One thing she's heard is survivors are tired of being poked and prodded by the scientists trying to figure out what happened. That is absolutely something I was enormously sensitive to. When I started doing this, it was only 8 years ago when I was a grad student I started to research public responses to tornado warnings. I was one of a very few people doing it. It's like old chasers talk about. In the old days, you could chase in Oklahoma, and now it's fool's errand. Especially on high-risk days. It's the same thing now with big tornado events. Now there's the gajillion researchers, it seems, wanting to get in there and talk to these people. So I stayed away from the survivors or the family members, the people who were directly impacted for the most part. So the people that I was talking to were just outside of that. They were in the community, but they weren't, I wasn't going door to door in the places that were hit. And I don't feel like for the research I'm trying to do, that's necessary, because I'm not just trying to capture why people died per se. I want to understand the big picture of what did people understand about this, because there should be some things shared between the people who were in the path who perished and the people who weren't in the path, who were just fortunate to not be hit. And so I don't think it's necessary to poke and prod the same people. And there's an ethical challenge arising for the social sciences in this. The atmosphere doesn't care how it's poked and prodded. You can put any number of different kinds of sensors on the same parcel and it's fine. That's not true for humans. We're going to have to start thinking about circling our wagons a little bit when events take place. Someone is going to have to take control of this. I'm actually bringing this back to the Vortex Southeast leadership as a recommendation, because they're funding a lot of this work. There's a lot of social sciences work going on, and we were all stepping on each other's toes. I tried to coordinate as best I could with various people to know where they were going and what people they talked to, and try to keep that separate as much as possible. But man, that's hard. There's so many people I don't even know about who are stepping into this field all of a sudden to do this. So we need to try to coordinate. That's an amazingly important question, Aubrey. And for anyone who's listening, we do not want to be have that effect on those communities. We want to have a soft touch. We just need to figure that out. All right. Well, we've lost James. So does anyone want to take? Hey, I don't know, Troy. Do you want to take over and be the James, get us through the picks and wrap us up?
Well, I don't really have a pick this week, but she's taken off on me. But I just wanted to mention real quickly that last week or about a week and a half ago, I had the chance to join Aubrey and all the people. I want to mention all the students at Mississippi State University, their AMS NWA chapter, and their Southeastern U.S. Severe Weather Symposium. They did such a great job. Aubrey gave a great presentation while we were there. That's my pick of the week. I don't have anything other than that, but I just wanted to mention what a good job the students did down there. It was a great meeting, 2-day meeting a couple of weekends ago. Alex Forbes and all the people down there, great job, and great job to Aubrey as well.
Awesome.
Great.
All right, John, do you have a pick?
Oh, I sure do. But first, Kim, let me mention one thing, and I perfectly understand what you're saying. One of the most humbling experiences for me was a number of years ago. I did a damage survey on an F3 tornado, and to have to go through a neighborhood that's been hit like that, and there are people just devastated by it, and you're walking through their property, you're walking through what's left of their lives. I agree 100% with what you're saying. We have to be so conscious of that. My pick of the week is dealing with, or actually it's an article which deals with tornadoes in Canada. So this is an article that showed up in EOS in the last week or so, and it talks about a Canadian project. And the name of that project, if I can hunt it down, is the Northern Tornadoes Project. So they're actually looking at where there may be Canadian tornado alleys. Very interesting.
Wow, very cool. Very cool. All right. Do we have our guest panelist, Jordan? I know we didn't give you warning of this, but the pick of the week is something where we choose something that's remotely, at least, pertaining to weather that we thought that would be interesting to share. Do you have anything in mind that you would like to highlight for us?
I don't have any necessarily particular pick of the week. I didn't really know exactly what was going on, but I guess maybe something that I thought was interesting in what you were talking about earlier, maybe a little bit of a question along that is, do you feel like that, guess when is the optimal time, if there is an optimal time of when people who have been impacted, the traumatic experience they go through whenever they see tornadoes and all the research that you've done, what do you think is the best time when you can ask these people what happened and how they felt? Obviously you don't want to do it immediately after it happened, but how do you balance knowing when to ask, when to kind of stop, when to push on that? How do you do it?
It's a great question. I don't think you'll find two researchers who have the exact same response. I think it depends on what you're trying to get. There's some data that's more perishable than others. I really I err on the side of go a couple weeks after. I don't want to be there in the crisis phase. So if there's emergency response, if there are people who are grieving, the community is grappling with the loss, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be there then. That's a deeply personal time, and that's a time when emergency responders have an important role that I don't want to interfere with. So I went when I knew that they were through the crisis phase and they were moving into, sort of the post-crisis, like longer term recovery sort of thing. So at that point, there had been a lot of other researchers who had already gone in and talked to individuals. So I was cognizant of who I'd spoke with for that reason. Again, not wanting to overpoke, overprod. So my approach might not get me, there might be some things that I steer away from as a result of that. But to me, I feel very comfortable with that. We all have to make decisions about these trade-offs, what it is that we're trying to get, what data we need. And so it's a really good question. You know that though, if you go too late, then people's recollections do start to fade. So you don't want to go too far out. That's why it's quick response work. The definition of quick can vary. All right. So with that, that's a great point. Thank you, Jordan. Do you want to highlight any student resources, anything that you have going on at the university? Maybe, for example, the OWL website or something. Is there anything cool brewing over in your corner?
Well, there's a lot of things happening down here at OU, especially with the students and some of the student organizations and student involvement. OU Nightly, which is the senior weather producer for that, and I kind of help out for students. And we have about 30 team members right now, from freshmen all the way up to seniors. And we come in and do a newscast 4:30 to 5 o'clock. And we just recently, I was part of the team to launch it on Facebook Live. And instead of doing it on the actual TV, we have it on the TV broadcast channel, but we do it mostly Facebook Live. And it's been interesting to see, our audience being a college audience, and a younger audience, they're more apt to want to watch, Facebook or Twitter, Periscope, and they don't really want to watch TV screen. And they also don't want to watch anything longer than 3 minutes. They only want to watch about 30 seconds, and that's about it. Then they want to go and study or work on homework or something else. And so one thing we've really been working with and trying to be better at is doing more short form, forecast discussions or things like that, that can get that attention. And it's been really interesting. A lot of the people, obviously OU is a university, and this is true for every university. I'm sure that Troy can attest to this as well. People really are from everywhere, and it's interesting to see how they react to different things. And just like the discussion we had earlier about colors and, words and everything, I think it's very interesting. I would be curious to see in a college environment just how varied the responses would be, because you're bringing people from all across the country and all those different cultures. And even one thing we do, we a lot of times in the spring, we will go speak to some of the athletes. Members of our team will go speak to the athletes, and we might give them a few tips on just really severe weather in general. Kevin, our university meteorologist, he actually does more of the training, but we'll come in sometimes and talk to them about tornadoes. And it's funny how they have no idea what Tornado Alley is, what tornadoes are, how they form, when they happen. They don't even know, because they're from different places, and that's just not something that they're familiar with. And we've had a couple of close calls at OU for the past few years, with very close calls in some situations. And so that's been really interesting, really just kind of working on that, and just we're in the business of communication, and we're really trying to figure out, and we're trying to equip our students, so to say, on how to better communicate something. Because, kind of our philosophy is there's always a better way to explain something and communicate it. And it's just a matter of trying to find, here's the next step. Okay, feel like we've accomplished this. Now let's move to this, and let's move on to this next thing, and let's try to figure out what we can do here. That's been really good working with the Oklahoma Weather Lab. Oklahoma Weather Lab has been great. They're continuing to grow, and they have the ships where we use the AWIPS, and they do forecasting podcast. that's been really awesome. I know they've been making really great strides there in the weather lab, and they recently presented a poster at AMS where they discussed everything we do in the weather lab. That was really awesome. So it's really been great times for students under you, and the opportunities have been continuing to rise. And obviously, National Weather Center, as you know, is awesome to be in, and just
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for giving us that highlight. I guess we can have the website for OWL could be your pick of the week. If you could put that into chat, then we'll be sure to get that posted. Thank you. And thank you for being on this week. Thank you so much for the comment that got us started on the important topic of color. Such a deep conversation. So I'll wrap things up with my pick of the week. I saw a news item that Barry Myers' vote should be up this week. So just a news item that I know is interesting to and noteworthy for our audience. So something to watch.
Wow.
All right. And I think with that, I'll give the benediction. I think that we're done. It was a wonderful show. Thank you all for such amazing questions. This, again, the things that we talk about in the show are just really the heart of what we're trying to do. And as a field, we're still grappling with all of that, what it is we're trying to do and how we do it. So thank you all for being a part of it. It's great to have you.
Well, Kim, thank you for what you did, because you're the one who drew this all together and gave us the opportunity to ask these questions. So thank you for your work.
Absolutely. Yep. One team. I'll do it together. All right. Well, you guys have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Kim.
social science on the Lee County tornado. I do believe that they're done. Yep. They're done. See, Aubrey's channel is still up. Aubrey's doing the news like I am. So hello to our friends watching on WeatherBrains. Thank you guys for watching. Great show tonight. Thanks to Danielle. And can't wait to listen to the end that I missed driving down the road tomorrow. So thank you guys on WeatherBrains. We'll see you next week. Have a great week. Thanks for watching.